The wind carried the dry hush of dusk across the barren field, brushing brittle stalks of dead grass against the slats of a leaning fence. Beyond that fence, in a paddock long stripped of its lushness, a chestnut gelding stood still as carved oak, his ears flicking only once, toward the sound of a girl humming. Lena Cartwright crouched in the hay beside the stall, her boots scuffed and one lace untied, brushing burrs from Whiskey's mane. She was 13, all bone and muscle from chores and sun, her long braid falling forward as she leaned in to whisper into the horse's neck. "He's late again," she said, not asking, not complaining, just stating a truth. Her voice was low, shaped by silence and stretched out years. The horse flicked his ear. She smiled faintly, then leaned her forehead against his. "You know what that means." They stayed like that a while, the world dimming around them, lantern light not yet lit. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, sharp and frantic. A door slammed shut. Then came the sound of tires on gravel, slow, uncertain, like someone debating every foot forward. Lena didn't move. She didn't need to see the truck. She knew the way it grumbled up the hill, its left headlight flickering as if ashamed of itself. The engine cut out, and then came the clink of glass, distinct, musical, cruel. Whiskey tensed. Lena stood, brushing hay from her trousers. She left the stall door unlatched and stepped outside as Emery Cartwright stumbled out of the cab. He was tall, once proud, his shoulders square even when the rest of him sagged. The denim jacket he wore had once belonged to a rodeo champion, a man Lena had never met, but heard of in barroom whispers and black and white photographs. Now it hung loose, stained with dust and drink. "You feed the animals?" he asked, voice rough, not looking at her. "They're fed," Lena answered. "Good," he muttered, rubbing at his brow. "Good girl." "I'm not a girl," she replied quietly. "I do more work than most grown men." He looked at her then, just briefly. And in that second, she thought she saw something flicker behind his bloodshot eyes. Regret, maybe. Or memory. But it passed too quickly to name. He walked past her toward the house, his steps uneven, boots catching in dry roots. Lena stayed where she was. She didn't follow. Not anymore. Inside, she heard the scrape of a chair pulled from the table, the clatter of a bottle neck against tin, the hush that followed as he drank the first swig. She counted them. 1, 2, 3. Lena turned back to the barn. The wind had picked up, tossing dry leaves against the door like small, desperate hands. She slipped inside, clicked the lantern on, and moved to Whiskey's stall. The gelding turned his head, eyes soft. "He spent the feed money, didn't he?" she asked. A low whicker was her answer. "I'll figure it out. Maybe Miss Clara'll need extra help this week." Whiskey nudged her side gently, and she leaned into him. Her face was tight, her voice steady. But her fingers trembled where they gripped the bridle. Above the feed sacks, half empty, all stale, she'd hidden a small mason jar tucked behind a beam. She checked it now. $17 and a few coins. Enough for hay and oats if she bartered hard. Not enough to leave. Not enough for much. She didn't hear Emery come back out, didn't hear the second vehicle pull up until its engine clicked off. Then she froze. 2 voices. One was his. The other, lower, oily, belonged to a man she didn't know. She crept to the edge of the barn, peered out through a gap in the wood. The pickup truck was black, newer. A man stepped from it wearing a jacket too clean for these parts. He was stocky, with a toothpick in his mouth and hands that stayed in his pockets. Emery gestured toward the paddock. The man squinted, nodded. Lena's stomach turned cold. "No," she whispered. "No, no." The men walked to the fence, and the stranger leaned on it, inspecting Whiskey's frame with an appraising eye. "He's sound. Strong as ever," Emery said. "Daughter's had him since he was a colt. She rides him clean. She know you're sellin' him? She'll know tomorrow." The man snorted. "How much?" Emery didn't even hesitate. "Bottle of Jameson and $20. Lena felt something inside her crack, a fault line long buried beneath hope. "Whiskey. For a bottle." The man tossed a saddle into the dust and handed over a bag. Green glass clinked. "Pleasure," the man said. They moved fast. Too fast. A lead rope looped. A hand tightened on Whiskey's bridle. Lena exploded out of the barn, bare feet pounding dirt, her scream high and feral. "Don't you touch him." The man paused. Emery flinched. "Let him go," she cried, slamming her palms against the stranger's chest. He didn't budge. Emery moved forward. "Lena." She turned on him. "You sold him." "It ain't like that," he said. But his voice had no spine. "You sold him for a drink." "I needed it," he muttered. The stranger clicked his tongue. "Kid's loud. I'll be goin' da." "No." Lena threw herself against Whiskey, wrapped her arms around his neck. "Please, don't take him. Please." The man gave her a long look. Not cruel, not kind. Just indifferent. Then he mounted, turned, and rode off. Whiskey's eyes met hers for a heartbeat, confused, trusting, then fading into the darkness. She stayed kneeling in the dirt long after the sound of hooves disappeared. By the time the sun rose, Lena had not slept. She sat on the front steps of the house, a blanket around her shoulders, her eyes rimmed red and raw. Emery emerged quietly. He stood behind her, unsure. "I'll get you another horse," he said. She said nothing. "You'll forget him." Still nothing. "I didn't mean." "You did," she said. He sat beside her, but she shifted away. They watched the sunrise. The light turned gold over the barren pasture. Somewhere in the distance, crows circled. "You gonna school today?" he asked. She stood, brushed off her jeans. "I'm going to get him back." "Lena." She turned to him, not angry, not pleading. Just finished. "I'm not coming back without him." She walked down the hill, toward the road, without looking back. Dust rose behind her like smoke. Inside the barn, the empty stall stood open. The air smelled like silence and loss. And in the loose straw, a single braid of chestnut mane lay curled like a question mark, waiting for an answer. The town stretched out in tired lines and faded paint, a place where everyone knew everyone's name, but forgot how to say them kindly. Lena walked with her hands balled into fists, boots scuffing dust, braids swinging low against her back. Her eyes, red from the night before, didn't blink often. She had a direction in mind. She didn't have a plan. The first place she went was Keller's Feed and Tack, where Mr. Keller was hauling grain sacks with one arm and nursing a cough with the other. He looked up when the bell on the door jingled. "Well now, ain't you supposed to be in school?" "I'm lookin' for a horse," she said. His brow lifted. "That so? I reckon you had one. Someone bought him last night. Chestnut gelding. White star on the forehead. Name's Whiskey." Mr. Keller leaned against the counter, dusting his palms off. "That your pa's doing?" She didn't answer. He read the silence right. Man in a black truck came through. Didn't say much. Paid cash. "That's all I know." "Did he say where he was headed?" Keller shook his head slowly. "Ain't my business to ask. But if I had to guess, probably sold him on. Greeley buys animals off folk like that. North of the county line." Lena nodded once. "Thank you." She left before he could say anything else. At the edge of town, where the sidewalk ended and the weeds started winning, she paused under the creaking sign of the Cross Spur Saloon. She didn't want to go in, but she had to. The air inside was thick with heat and regret. Men hunched over drinks though the sun was barely past its first yawn. Smoke clung to the rafters. She scanned the bar for a familiar face and found Miss Clara wiping down a corner booth, silver hair pulled tight into a bun. Clara looked up. "Lena Cartwright. You better have a good reason." "I do," Lena said. "I'm looking for someone who might know where a horse got sold." "You mean Whiskey," Clara said quietly. Lena blinked. "You know." Your daddy was in here last night. Tried to pay off his tab in tears. Left with a bottle and less dignity than he came in with. Did he mention a name? Greeley. Clara paused. He said something about that bastard north with a corral full of broken things. I assumed he meant Greeley. Not many bastards that far north. Where's Greeley live? Up on Mill Flat Road. Dirt path past Hollow Bridge. Third gate on the left, though you'll know it by the stench. Lena nodded. Thank you. Clara grabbed her wrist before she could turn. You go out there alone, you be smart. He's not a kind man. Not like his brother was. I'm not going for kindness. Clara let her go. The sun was halfway to noon when Lena reached the hitching post outside Widow Danvers's place. The old woman sat on her porch, peeling potatoes into a bucket. Ma'am, Lena said. Danvers glanced up. You runnin', or followin'? Following. The woman squinted. You're Cartwright's girl. Yes'm. Danvers jerked her head toward the road. Ain't got much to spare, but the wagon still rolls. Hop up. Lena climbed onto the wooden bench beside her. The old mule pulling the wagon gave no notice of the extra weight. They started forward with a groan of wheels. The road was slow, the silence between them comfortable. Lena kept her eyes ahead, dust rising in thin threads behind them. After a while, Danvers spoke. Your mama rode a horse like it was stitched to her soul. I know. She used to ride bareback through Cotton Creek, singing louder than the wind. I used to watch her and think, that girl was born in the wrong century. She was happy then, Lena said. She was fire, Danvers answered. Your daddy wasn't built to hold fire. They rode in silence a while longer. Is it true? Danvers asked. He sold your horse for a bottle? Yes. Danvers didn't say anything after that. Just clicked her tongue and steered the mule past Hollow Bridge. When the ruts in the road got too deep, she pulled the wagon to a stop. This is as far as I go. Thank you, Lena said, climbing down. Danvers handed her a cloth bundle. Bread and jerky. You'll need it. Lena nodded, slung the pack over her shoulder, and started walking. Mill Flat Road was narrow, hemmed in by weeds and rusted fencing. Buzzards circled low, casting wheeling shadows across the dirt. It took another hour before she saw it, an old gate, half off its hinges, with a broken sign swinging sideways. A crow perched on the post and cawed once, as if in warning. She stepped through. The yard smelled of rot and manure. Horses stood in sagging pens, ribs showing, eyes dull. Some lifted their heads as she passed. None moved toward her. She saw him then, Whiskey. Far corner pen. Head down, one hind leg cocked tiredly. Flies buzzed around his eyes. His coat had lost its sheen. Her breath caught. Whiskey. He didn't lift his head. You made a mistake, a voice said behind her. She turned. The man who stepped forward had a long scar across his jaw and a hat pulled low. He was shorter than she expected, thick arms folded. Greeley. You can't be here, he said. No trespassing. I came for my horse. He snorted. No such thing. Horse is mine. You bought him from a drunk. I paid. Doesn't matter how drunk he was. I have money. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the mason jar. It rattled, coins and crumpled bills. He stared. How much? $43 and a silver ring. He laughed. You think that buys a horse? It's all I have. That's the truth, girl. He walked to the fence, spat in the dirt. Tell you what. He's a sweet thing, but I've already run him. If he breaks down, he ain't worth feed. You want him back. You race for him. Lena stared. Race. You and me. Or rather, you and my new stallion. You beat him, Whiskey's yours. And if I lose, you don't come back. She felt the heat rise in her cheeks. Her hands trembled, but she didn't back away. "I'll race. Sunrise tomorrow. Be here. I need to see him." Greeley shrugged. "Don't pet him. Don't talk to him." She walked to the gate. Whiskey turned his head slowly. His eyes met hers, and for a second something flickered. Recognition, barely lit. She stepped forward and placed her hand on the wood slat. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'll get you out." Whiskey didn't move, but his ears flicked forward. She sat beside the pen as the sun dipped low, casting everything in bronze. Greeley watched her from the house but didn't tell her to leave. When night fell, she curled into her coat, laying her head against the fence. Across from her, Whiskey stood still, the last of the light catching in his tired eyes. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. Not until she won. The air smelled like iron and old sweat as the first light of morning slid across the paddocks. Lena stood at the edge of the dirt strip Greeley had scratched into the earth with a stick, marking out a crude track from the gate to the far cottonwood tree and back again. The cold gnawed at her fingers, but she didn't shiver. She hadn't slept. Hadn't eaten since Widow Danvers handed her bread and jerky the day before. Her hunger felt far away, a forgotten ache beneath the pounding in her chest. Whiskey stood quietly behind the fence, head low but watching her. He hadn't whinnied, hadn't come forward. But he was watching. Greeley emerged from the sagging porch like a man roused from hibernation, grumbling, stretching, cracking his knuckles. He carried a saddle slung over one shoulder, his boots leaving deep grooves in the dirt. "Hope you said your prayers, girl," he muttered. "He don't like strangers." He pointed to the far pen, where a black stallion paced with slow, sinewy power. The horse's flanks twitched, ears constantly moving. Its eyes, cold and clever, tracked everything. "What's his name?" Lena asked. "Doesn't matter. I want to know." Greeley smirked. "Ghost." She nodded once, then turned back to Whiskey's pen. She reached for the latch, but paused. Her hands hovered. Another man stepped forward from the shadows of the barn, a wiry, older figure with a sun-worn face and hands like folded leather. He wore a cap low over his brow and held a small tool bag. Rufus, the retired jockey who'd once raced in Tulsa before his knees gave out and the trainers stopped calling. "Let me look at him," Rufus said softly. Lena stepped aside. She didn't know who sent him or why he'd come, but she didn't question it. Rufus opened the gate and moved to Whiskey's side with the grace of someone who had built trust with animals one whisper at a time. He ran his hand along the gelding's spine, lifted a hoof, checked the shoes, the legs. "He's tender in the right fore, but sound enough for short distance." Lena swallowed. "Will he run?" "That's not the question," Rufus said, glancing up. "The question is, will you ride him like he remembers?" She blinked. I haven't been on him in a while." "Then you better remind him who you are." Rufus helped saddle him. Every movement was careful, respectful, quiet. Whiskey flinched once, then stilled. "I'll ride bareback," Lena said. "He hates the bit." Greeley scoffed. "That's suicide." Rufus didn't say anything. Just stepped back and let her take the reins. Lena walked Whiskey to the starting line, her heart hammering. She mounted in one smooth motion, legs pressing gently against his sides. For a moment, the world dropped away. No Greeley. No ghost. Just the two of them and the wind waiting to be split. "You remember me?" she whispered, leaning forward to brush her cheek against his neck. "It's just you and me now. Like it used to be." He shifted beneath her, exhaling hard. Greeley brought out Ghost with the swagger of someone parading a trophy. The stallion fought the bridle, reared once. Greeley cursed and jerked the reins. The stallion responded with a snarl that wasn't human but wasn't quite animal either. They lined up. Rufus stood between them, raising one arm. "Down to the cottonwood and back," he called. "Fair start. First one across wins." Lena stared ahead, breathing with Whiskey. In, out, in, out. She could feel his ribs under her legs, the beat of his heart. He was tired, but he still had something left. Go! Ghost lunged like a cannonball, hooves tearing up dirt. Whiskey hesitated, half a breath, then surged forward, his muscles stretching like pulled wire. The dust swallowed them both. Lena leaned forward, low to his neck. "Come on, boy," she whispered. "You know the way." Ghost had the lead, 2 lengths ahead. His hooves barely touched ground, cutting arcs through the dirt like black lightning. Lena didn't push Whiskey. Not yet. The cottonwood approached, towering like a judge. Ghost rounded it wide, reckless. Lena whispered again. Whiskey cut close, tight and clean. They gained ground. Now. She leaned harder, clung with her knees, and let go of fear. Whiskey responded. Their world narrowed to rhythm and breath. The pounding of hooves, the whip of wind, the sting of grit in her eyes. Ghost was a blur to her left. Close. Closer. Then, Whiskey's stride lengthened. Just enough. They were even. Lena felt it like a jolt, his trust returning. He remembered. The songs. The firelight. The years. He pushed. Ghost snorted, tried to surge, but Lena and Whiskey were already flying. The finish line came fast, Rufus's figure a silhouette against the sun. A cry tore from Greeley's mouth. Ghost threw his head. But it was too late. Whiskey crossed first. The silence that followed was full of birdsong and dust settling. Lena dismounted slowly, her legs shaking. She didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just laid her forehead against Whiskey's and let out the breath she'd been holding for days. Greeley cursed and kicked the fence. "You cheated." Rufus raised an eyebrow. "You picked the rules. She's a child. She rode better than you ever will." Lena said nothing. She walked Whiskey toward the gate. Greeley grabbed her arm. "You ever show your face here again?" She stared up at him, unflinching. "I won't need to." He let her go. Rufus met her outside the gate. "Where you headed?" "Home. Long walk. I've got company." He glanced at Whiskey. "You ever need a job, you come find me. There's always room for folks who don't scare easy." Lena nodded, then started walking. Whiskey limped slightly, but his head was high. Every step was a quiet declaration. By the time they reached the ridge, the sky had turned gold, and the world seemed wider than it ever had before. Lena didn't know what would wait for her back home. Didn't know if Emery would be there. Didn't care. She had her horse. He had her. That was enough, for now. The road back wasn't paved with triumph. It was just dust and gravel and silence broken by the occasional groan of a tired gelding. Lena walked beside Whiskey, letting him set the pace. His limp was better than it had been that morning, but every few steps he hesitated, like his legs remembered things they'd rather forget. She didn't rush him. Some scars took longer to fade than others. They passed the broken fence near Hollow Bridge, and she paused just long enough to untie a strip of her sleeve and loop it through a splintered post, like a ribbon left in a storybook, marking a chapter she wasn't ready to reread. A memory of Widow Danvers waiting on the porch with her back straight and eyes like iron flashed in her mind. Lena smiled softly and walked on. It took them a day and a half to make it home. Home wasn't much different. The barn still leaned a little too far south, and the paint on the house peeled in the same slow curls it had when she left. But there was something different in the air, something quieter, heavier. The front door was open. She stopped at the gate, fingers tightening around Whiskey's reins. "Stay here," she whispered, and stepped forward alone. The screen door creaked when she pushed it open. The scent of coffee, not fresh, but reheated, drifted out. She stepped inside, boot heels soft on worn wood. Emery sat at the kitchen table. He was shaved. His eyes weren't bloodshot. There was no bottle in sight. Lena said nothing. He looked up slowly. When his gaze met hers, she saw the storm in it, what remained after a man had run out of things to blame. "I didn't think you'd come back," he said. I didn't come back for you. He nodded, as if that hurt and made sense at the same time. He out there. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. He stood. I fixed the back stall. Wasn't sure if. He cleared his throat. It's got clean straw. She watched him carefully. No swagger. No begging. Just quiet. Just waiting. Why? She asked. Emery didn't pretend not to understand. Because I remembered something, he said. Your mama. She used to tell me, one day that girl's gonna ride clean out of this place and not look back. I didn't believe her. Thought she was just sayin' it to hurt me. He rubbed the back of his neck. But when I saw you ride, his voice cracked. It wasn't the horse I was watchin'. It was you. You looked just like her. Lena shifted, arms crossed. I ain't got the right to ask forgiveness, he said. But I'm a skin for the chance to earn it. She didn't move. Don't need you to forgive me now. Just, maybe don't hate me forever. She nodded once. That was all she could give. They went out to the yard together. Emery stood at the fence as Lena led Whiskey in. The horse stopped in front of him, snorted, and turned his head away. Can't say I blame him, Emery murmured. Lena ran her hand down Whiskey's neck. He's not the same, she said. But he remembers. I'll help you take care of him, Emery offered. I can start there. You can muck the stalls, she said. He smiled, a quiet thing, unsure. Fair. The days moved slower after that. Lena didn't forgive him overnight, and Emery didn't expect her to. He worked quietly, rising early, feeding the chickens, cutting wood, patching the porch without being asked. He didn't drink. Not anymore. There were tremors in his hands some mornings, but he weathered them in silence. Whiskey healed in the same quiet way, step by step, scar by scar. He grew stronger with each day, each ride. Lena never pushed him hard. They went out in the early dawnlight, just walking. She talked more than she had in years, stories from when she was little, from when she used to braid his mane and pretend they were crossing deserts or mountain passes. He listened, the way only a horse could, without interruption or doubt. One evening, after a quiet supper, Emery came in from the barn holding something in his calloused hands. I found this, he said, placing a small wooden carving on the table. It was a horse, rough, unfinished, but familiar. She used to whittle, he added. Your mama. I watched her hands for so long, I guess they stayed in mine. Lena reached out slowly and picked up the carving. She turned it over in her palm. She'd have liked what you did, Emery said. She'd have liked Whiskey, Lena replied. She'd have loved you. Still does, I reckon. The screen door banged once, and the wind shifted. Lena tucked the carving into her pocket and stood. We're gonna ride tomorrow, she said. Where to? Nowhere important. She didn't look back as she stepped onto the porch, the wind tugging at her braid like it remembered it, too. That night, sleep came easier. Morning brought gold spilling across the fields, a wind that danced without pushing, and the hush of a world not quite ready to start again. Lena saddled Whiskey gently. He stepped forward with strength now, his head high, coat gleaming in the sun. Emery stood nearby, holding the gate open. They didn't speak. Lena mounted. She didn't race, didn't gallop. She let Whiskey find his rhythm, and the two of them rode through the fields until the house disappeared behind them, swallowed by grass and light. At the top of the ridge, she paused. Looked out. A hawk circled high above, wheeling in a slow arc. She touched her heel to Whiskey's side, and they moved on, together, steady, unafraid. Behind them, the house stood waiting. Not a place of endings, but a place where something had survived the burning and dared to begin again.